Hi, everyone, and welcome to my Astro Magic series. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about synchronicity. And this term was first coined by Carl Jung, and it essentially means meaningful coincidences. So these are events related by meaning rather than cause and effect. So while Jung was thinking about this idea of synchronicity, he wasn't besties with Albert Einstein, but they were intellectual acquaintances, and he would hold these dinner parties and they would naturally talk about their kind of different theories. Now, obviously, at the time, Einstein was talking about his theory of relativity, and that got Carl Jung kind of thinking if time and space are relative, then perhaps the physical world that we live in is fluid and not actually as rigid as we first thought. Now, Jung was a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, and psychologist. And so he did have patients. And you've probably heard this story before, but it's a really good way to explain synchronicity, I guess, in real world terms. So he had this patient that was quite rational, quite in her head, and it meant that she was struggling to kind of engage with the therapeutic process. And in one of these sessions, she was talking about a particular dream that she'd had where she saw a scarab beetle. And as she was describing the dream, Carl Jung heard some tapping on the window. And when he looked over, there was actually a rose beetle. And he picked it up, handed it to her, and said, "Here is your scarab." And apparently, the shock of seeing this beetle at the time that she was describing her dream about this beetle, it broke the mental block that she was having. And moving forward, they had much more successful therapy sessions. And I think this is such a simple but effective way to show how synchronicities are about those meanings. And they were able to discuss in more detail what the actual kind of symbolism of a scarab beetle meant. And all of this kind of feeds into this core philosophy, which I've said a million times before, as above, so below. And it essentially, in this context, is talking about the psyche and our mind and how matter and the physical world that we live in is all one united foundation. Now, as a scientist, I can explain the how. Science explains how something happens. So how a ice cube melts into a pool of water is because as it gets warmer, the particles move quicker and then they spread out. Really basic. But synchronicity doesn't explain the how, it explains why, and it gives meaning. So synchronicities often occur during high stakes psychological times and are connected to the collective unconsciousness and reflects fundamental human patterns and archetypes. So before I go on to discuss a little bit about my own personal journey with this magic, I just want to address the skeptics, especially around confirmation bias. Now, this is where we seek what we already believe. And then we also have frequency illusion. So this is, for example, the other day I was recording my Omen Walks episode, and I was talking about a friend who had seen a fox in her time of need. And ever since I've mentioned that fox, I see foxes everywhere. Not real ones, but I saw pin and a little cute fox pin I actually took from a bookstore. I didn't steal it, it was free. And then I went to an art exhibition and I saw fox paintings and fox sculptures, and it's just, they're everywhere. And I was just like, this is a lot. But the frequency illusion is the false perception that a newly noticed thing is suddenly occurring more often, while confirmation bias is the broader tendency to seek information that supports pre-existing beliefs. And both of those can get mixed up and confused with synchronicity. What I'm talking about today is much deeper than just noticing more foxes, for example. I believe that these messages aren't just a coincidence, something coincidence like that. It's the universe winking at you to let you know that you're on the right path, or perhaps even a shift in your consciousness is happening. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about how this has shown up in my life and why I think it's a really good way to increase your spiritual awareness, really. So I want to talk to you about this little book called Celestine Prophecy. It's by James Redfield. I read this years ago, and I know I keep saying everything's life changing, but this is one of the books that I would add to my life changing list books because it was so well together and it really gets you thinking. I highly recommend it, especially if you're into all of those ideas that I've just been talking about around synchronicity. And essentially, this story is about someone who goes to Peru on the hunt for a manuscript, an ancient manuscript that's very sacred. And in this manuscript contains 9 insights. And the first insight is synchronicity. It's about coincidences steering our destiny. And these 9 insights predict a global spiritual awakening that shifts humanity from a materialistic focus to a more conscious, energetic, and synchronistic life. And it highlights the role that awareness has in our lives. And I think if you take anything away, it's just about just being more aware of what's around you. And I know it's hard to do that when we're in the daily grind, 9 to 5, working, juggling everything. It's like, who has time to look around and be aware? But just slowing down and doing that it's really enlightened my life. So actual examples where synchronicity has shown up. So I was driving to visit a friend and, when your mind just wanders, I don't know why, I just started thinking about having a cool party trick and, those people that I've got a photographic memory and they can just look at something, and say how many there are just instantly without even, it's just like an instant thing. I thought that's such a cool little trick. I wish I could do that. And I was just imagining some matchsticks falling out of a box and counting them and just being able to say 22, 33, and like the whole crowd are like, so impressed. But yeah, it was a weird little random thought that I had. And then obviously didn't think about it anymore, moved on to probably other random thoughts and then arrived at my friends and we were just getting on and it was fine. But then later in the evening, we wanted to light a candle and she couldn't find a lighter, but she did have a box of matches. And as she went to hand them to me, I can't remember the exact situation, but the matchstick box dropped and all the matches fell out. And in that split second, I first of all thought, whoa, like just not long ago, a few hours ago, had this random thought about this matchstick box dropping and now it's happened. All in the same time, I just instantly was like, there's 14. And I picked them all up and there were 13. I was like, okay, I'm obviously not that good. But then I saw that there was one kind of that had flung out of sight behind like the table legs. They were actually 14. I know. So I obviously added that to my synchronicity logbook because I was like, weird. What else? Another example is where I travel quite a lot for work. And as I've got older, I've got more anxious about long flights and being away from home, being homesick. And so I thought it'd be quite nice to have a travel teddy. I know I'm not I'm in my 40s, but I just thought, do you know what? I can spray the teddy with my favorite perfume. It can remind me of home. And I just thought it'd be a nice thing to have. And when I was in Waitrose, I was thinking, well, they're not going to sell it in here. Where could I probably get one? And as I was thinking that, I looked at the aisle, one of the aisles, probably beans and Heinz. I don't know what was in the aisle, but there was also a basket full of plush teddies, like little tiny ones. And I was just like, oh my God, okay. So then I bought one and I've never seen one in there ever before. And I also have never seen that basket since. So that was again, just like thought of it and it's just right there. So again, that went in my kind of synchronicity logbook. There's been lots of other things, social ones. You probably had loads of these as well. For some reason, I just kept thinking of a particular friend. She kept popping up into my mind, but I was also thinking about a mutual person that we both knew that lives nowhere near us. And then I bumped into the friend, which isn't weird in itself because we're both kind of local to each other. But the person she was with was this other mutual person who doesn't live anywhere near us. And she'd just come down to visit. And it was like, oh, that's just so weird that I've been randomly thinking about both of you. And you've probably had that kind of message manifestation where you think of someone and then your phone pings and it's them. Or, yeah, anything like that. And one thing that also happened was I had a dream about a family member that I hadn't seen in about 15 years. Like, it had been so long. And then a few days later, after this dream, my aunt messaged me and she said she bumped into that person that was in my dream who had given her their number to pass on to me. And I was just like, hey, look, what are the chances? What are the odds? Coincidence? And another thing that you might find is that, you know, especially if you're very close with someone, that sometimes you're matching or complementary, like the clothes and stuff that you wear. So for me, that's my mom. And whenever we meet up, we do really tend to complement each other. And there was a day when we met up in London, we both had like orange accents, like the way we'd done our outfit was just very similar. And you probably have that with people you're close to. And I know we normally think of that as like for twins or they've got that kind of twin psychic energy. But honestly, you can do it with anyone that you have like a close connection with. You'll start to see little kind of similarities or things that you do the same. And honestly, I think it's really interesting. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed kind of noting all of these down and trying to understand what the meaning might be and trying to explain the why. Now, this is essentially talking about the right place, the right time, but also it ascribes to my tagline of my YouTube channel, which is when you let go, you ascend. When you let go of all the social pressures, the norms, what we're supposed to think, what we're led to believe. And if you let go all of that and just observe and trust your gut and trust your lived experience, that's when you ascend. That's when you get that spiritual awakening and when you start to feel enlightened. So if any of this has piqued your interest, I, as always, have given a little beginner's guide to get you started. And I would say the first thing to do is start a synchronicity logbook. It doesn't have to be forever. You could do it for a particular day, 3 days, a week, a month, 3 months, whatever works for you. Just know that in that time, that's when you're going to be on the lookout, as it were, for synchronicities. You can either go old school and write it in a journal. You could use a digital notebook, or you could even leave yourself voice notes. It doesn't really matter how you do it as long as it works for you. And I would say you need to start looking for repeated numbers, symbols, omens. Watch my Women's Walk episode. Overheard snippets of conversation, dreams. Dreams are so important, as you've seen from the Scarab example. Our dreams are full of symbolism and memories and messages. And so, you know, keep a dream diary. Start to think, are there any patterns or messages? And the 5 steps to remember is 1, witness. So note down objective facts. What's the date? What's the time? What happened? Having a date and time also means that if you're interested in putting up the chart, the astrological chart, then you can start to see the astrology behind what's happened as well. Examine, why did it stand out? What was emotional about it? What made you think, actually, I need to write this down? Annotate, like what were you actually thinking about just before it happened? That can also give you kind of some clues as to what the meaning might be. And then verify, is this a frequency illusion? Are you just seeing foxes everywhere because I've just said foxes? Or is this something truly rare, like the matchstick box that happened with me? And then engage. Is there an action item? Do you need to call someone because of this synchronicity? Do you need to change or adjust your plan slightly because of this synchronicity? Is there anything that you actually need to do, or is this just something you need to hold and contemplate? So as always, I have made a cute little synchronicity worksheet to help and guide you if this is something you'd like to get started with. And you can download it as always. I'm hoping that I'll be able to put that into the comments or somewhere for you to access it easily. But I'd just like to leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Jung, which is, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Until next time.